As y'all probably heard, Barack Obama did win in North Carolina and Virginia, which is incredible. I'm going to speak to the changing character of the working class in the South and kind of some of the stuff that laid the kind of, this is a reflection of, Democrats haven't won the U.S. North Carolina Electoral College's vote since 1976. And equally indicative, though, was another race for the U.S. Senate, which was a seat previously held by, the violently racist Jesse Helms, that's been in the Republicans' hands since 1973. Yeah, boo, right? And so that seat also was turned over to the Democrats. There's a Democrat named Kay Hagan, which isn't the greatest person, but it's moving, right? So, these changes are happening in the South for a number of reasons. I'm going to talk some about immigration. I'm going to talk some about the manufacturing job losses, and some of the new organizing going on in the largely unorganized workforce in the South. As y'all may know, the South, the population of the South is the fastest growing region in the country. There's actually 9 new political districts in the 2010 census will be shifted to the South. 9 electoral college votes. So it's overwhelmingly growing. A large number of which, of course, immigrants. There's also a number of people who are coming back in the South, black and white workers alike. South Carolina actually is a state with the single state with the most rapidly growing immigrant population. North Carolina, where we are, and Tennessee are the next fastest. But not only that, the South is also, of course, the home of a majority of African Americans in the country. But interesting enough, also, is some of the way that capital flows in and out of the South as well, through these workforces, mainly nowadays in the terms of finance capital. As y'all know, most of the capital in the country is invested no longer in production, but more in finance. Charlotte, North Carolina, where I lived for about 15 years, and a lot of Raleigh Fist comrades are from, is actually the headquarters of Bank of America, which now owns Countrywide, and also Wachovia. These 2 huge banks have their international headquarters in Charlotte, which also own a lot of the foreclosures are owned and processed there. And the South, is disproportionately affected by foreclosures. It's interesting enough also in 2009, Alabama will actually be the single state with the largest amount of auto producing in the country. A lot of it's being shifted from Michigan down to the largely unorganized South, mainly in Alabama, Georgia, other places. And they're also developing these major transportation hubs throughout the South, mainly in Texas, as a way to, of course, ship capital in and out from the whole continent down to South America to kind of avoid the heavily organized ports, of course. So with all this intense development, of course, and shifting of capital, of course, comes with heavy job losses, like the rest of the country, but particularly hit hard in states like North Carolina, where a lot of the manufacturing is being shifted out, sent other places. It's like, I feel like every month, poultry plants, textiles, lumber, all kinds of things are continually being shifted through and out of the South and out of the hands of workers, mostly in unorganized, ununionized workplaces. Just last month alone, there was like 5 or 6 plants with over 400 workers each that closed. Pilgrim Pride, this big poultry plant, which a lot of us know about, was had all these ICE raids throughout the country recently in these poultry plants. Announced they're going to lay off 20,000 poultry workers in North Carolina. And interesting enough, they closed a plant last year in Siler City, which is in Chatham County, right south of Chapel Hill. And now, meanwhile, there's this other plant with about 200 mostly African American workers that's on strike right now. Some of the comrades got to visit this Moncure plywood factory. It's mostly black workers on the line, and of course they're hiring directly in to cross the line. These workers that were just laid off last year from this poultry plant. Of course, we're unfamiliar with the way they pit black and brown and white workers against each other, but it takes obviously very real. It's every day. In our experience in the South. But interesting enough, the movement in the South is picking up. The movement in the South is really on a rise. But it's not in the traditional sense. Particularly the labor movement. A lot of the big unions, the AFL and the Change to Win unions, are not investing a lot of resources in the South. It takes smaller unions like UE, but also more untraditional models of organizing workers like worker centers and community labor alliances and straight up through the black churches. A lot of times workers are organizing and building direct ties for contracts that aren't necessarily struggles that aren't necessarily through contracts and formally recognized struggles, but are in a real way winning real gains for workers, which lays the ground for fertile struggle, when and if the big trade unions do want to come to the South. I know a lot of y'all heard about, I kind of want to talk a little bit about a lot of the struggles that have been, just in the last 2 or 3 years, that have been huge struggles. Of course, the Charleston 5 victory with the longshore workers a few years back was a massive struggle against racism, national oppression of workers. The Houston janitors, they just organized through SEIU, 5,000 janitors and families got a contract. Farm Labor Organizing Committee, which is the first ever contract for migrant workers. We just signed a few years ago in North Carolina, covering over 7,000 migrant workers. They're now taking on R.J. Reynolds. The Immokalee workers, of course, near where Mike and Miami are working. Mostly tobacco growers have had, tomato growers have had 3 huge victories against Yum Brands and Tobacco Bell, McDonald's, and even recently Burger King. Not to mention the various levels of struggle that broke out around Hurricane Katrina, worker struggles that came out with the suspension of Davis Beacon and prevailing wages dropping. Of course, one of the biggest ones we know about, like the 500 Indian guest workers that had the big struggle against Signal International. And of course, some more struggles in our state. The largest hog-producing plant in the country has been around for 15 years and still isn't unionized. UFCW has been struggling for years. They actually just recently entered negotiations after a series of militant strikes and of course ICE raids and immigrant raids that have pitted workers, but they're actually entering negotiations now, which is a step forward, potentially, could be. And of course the struggle that I'm directly involved with as well with public sector workers in North Carolina, which are also on the rise. That North Carolina is the only state in the country. We have one of our strong leaders here, Brother Dwayne Harding. Got to give a shout out to him. One of the strong leaders of the Charlotte City Workers Union. We got because in North Carolina it's the only state in the whole country, the only territory on earth where it's illegal to have a union contract, right? It's a ban by law. This goes back to old 1950s segregation. So it was put in place on books in 1959. So we got these huge struggles, right? Groups like Black Workers for Justice, groups like the Mississippi Workers Center that are developing these really powerful community-based ways of organizing. This recent coalition that was launched that's had between 5,000 and 7,000 people in the streets the last 2 Februaries. 81 mostly oppressed people and workers' organizations that have been organizing around this people's agenda, this 14-point people's agenda, which I've written about in our paper, now taking on these people's assemblies where people all around the state, from Rocky Mount to Chapel Hill to Raleigh, having these really vibrant people's assemblies talking about black land loss, environmental racism, jobs, historical black colleges, all these issues, the war. And so, we're of course really, Raleigh Fist has done a lot of work to help build these up and to bring youth into it and young workers as well. I just want to invite all you comrades to come down south to Durham, North Carolina. Of course, visit us anytime. You're welcome. We need to hear about the stories and the legacy of struggle of our comrades, but also on the 12th through 14th of December, a very important conference, the Southern Human Rights Organizers Conference, which, FIST is helping play a large role in organizing in youth, but also from bringing rank and file workers into it to participate and build, a workers' movement. So comrades, appreciate y'all's support. It's time to organize the South.